World Championship Wrestling. How we miss your coke-fueled, neon-soaked greatness almost 2 decades after you closed your doors. WWE's fiercest rivals and biggest competition, WCW offered a genuine alternative not just for fans but also for wrestlers until they shut up shop and were bought by Vince McMahon in 2001. For the most part, a talent knew that if they left one, they always had the other as an option. Vinnie Vegas not working out for you, Kevin? Why don't you go be Diesel with us? Still want to wrestle, Randy? Come and be the macho man over here, mates. Odds are that if you were a star in one company, that you could go and be a star in the other. But for a few, it didn't quite work out that way. This seems especially true of WCW talent who found themselves moving up north. It's often said that the top brass at Titan Towers don't care what you've done elsewhere, and what counts is that you can prove yourself there. But some simply couldn't figure it out, whether they were only there for a cup of coffee or had several chances and different gimmicks to get it right. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic.com, and these are 10 WCW stars that flopped in WWE. Number 10, Dean Malenko. The man of 1,000 holds was one of the anchors of the WCW midcard, typically competing in the Cruiserweight, United States, and tag team title scenes. A multi-time champion, the icy Malenko got over due to his impressive technical skills, which he was able to demonstrate in long and often show-stealing matches with the likes of Rey Mysterio, Eddie Guerrero, and Chris Jericho. After jumping to WWE with his fellow Radicals in early 2000, it quickly became obvious that Dino Machino was the least valued member of the group. He won the WWE Light Heavyweight title, sure, but he spent most of his time making up the numbers or wrestling on low-priority shows like Heat, Metal, and Jacked. After quietly retiring at the end of 2001, Malenko became a road agent, a position he held until 2019 before being let go and signing with AEW. Where did it go wrong for Malenko in WWE? Put simply, by the time he arrived in the company, he'd had his injuries, was getting on in years, and wrestled a style that has never been in favor with his boss. They tried to spice things up with a ladies' man gimmick and a feud with Lita and the Hardy Boys, but it's clear that he was able to contribute more behind the scenes than in front of the camera. Number 9, Ultimo Dragon. Like Malenko, Ultimo Dragon stood out in WCW's mid-card melee and won over audiences with his hybrid of Mexican lucha libre and Japanese strong style that is in vogue today. A star in the Orient and south of the border, Dragon's career temporarily came to an end in 1998 after a botched elbow operation. Thankfully, another later surgery corrected the mistake, and Dragon was able to return to wrestling, signing with WWE in 2003. Debuting amid much fanfare on an episode of SmackDown taped from Madison Square Garden, he was able to fulfill 2 lifelong dreams at the same time: wrestling for WWE and having a match in the world's most famous arena. Sadly, the thing Dragon's WWE run is best remembered for is him slipping on his cape during his entrance at WrestleMania 20, also in MSG. Aside from the banana peel moment, Dragon didn't do a lot while on the blue brand and competed primarily on velocity. Shortly after the Mania mishap, Dragon left the company, never to return. There were rumors that a return was on the cards later in the year, where Dragon would ditch his iconic mask and ring gear, change his name to simply Asai, his actual surname, something that all stemmed from Stephanie McMahon catching a glimpse of him without the hood on and commenting that she thought he was rather good looking. Watch your back, Hunter. Number 8, Barry Windham. One of the most underrated wrestlers ever, Big Barry Windham was still a big star in WCW despite never quite reaching the heights expected of him. In Turnertown, Windham had many outstanding matches with the likes of Ric Flair, Sting, and Dusty Rhodes, and had good runs as a member of the Four Horsemen and in a tag team with a young Dustin Rhodes. In WWE, Windham had a few different spells, none of which were very successful. His first stint was in the mid-80s in the US Express tag team with brother-in-law Mike Rotundo, aka IRS, aka Bray Wyatt's actual daddy. That lasted only a year before Baz left, but he would come back once again at the end of the decade as the Widowmaker, a heel cowboy character who would enjoy a 4-month winning streak. Windham quickly left the company, however, after his father and brother became embroiled in a counterfeiting scandal. The next attempt was in 1996, with Windham portraying the bizarre Stalker character. The Widowmaker, the Stalker, are these wrestling personas or some sort of crap late-night made-for-TV thriller? A final repackaging as a member of the New Blackjacks along with pal Bradshaw proved that putting new in front of something doesn't necessarily make it better. In fact, it never does. Number 7, Too Cold Scorpio. Way Way ahead of his time and a hell of a high flyer for his day, Too Cold Scorpio's greatest success came in Japan, but he was still a star during the dark days of early 90s WCW. He was only around for a couple of years, but managed to dazzle fans with his innovative offense. Moves like the 450 splash, tumbleweed leg drop, and various other flips and twists helped him stand out and get over strong. A short tag team title reign with clean-cut babyface Marcus Not Quite Buff Bagwell was a highlight before he left the company and headed for ECW. After a couple of years wrestling for Paul Heyman in the land of the extreme, he was then off to WWE. This is the WWE where if you didn't have an outlandish character before, during this time, you damn sure got one. Scorpio was turned into Flash Funk, complete with dancing, fur coats, and funkettes. When that got over like a fart at a funeral, the gimmick was ditched and he went back to being Scorpio as a member of the long-forgotten Job Squad and participated in the notorious Brawl for All before being released in early '99. Scorpio returned to WWE as Flash Funk in 2006, but never made it to television, wrestling in the developmental leagues and on a few live events before being sent back to the indies. Number 6, Lance Storm. Laugh a Minute Lance gained his reputation in ECW, having great matches with just about everyone he locked up with, and forming a couple of memorable teams with Chris Candido and Just Incredible. Like many in Paul Heyman's tribe, Lance enjoyed the work, but got a little tired trying to pay his bills with hot air, and so made the move to WCW in 2000, where he was the recipient of an immediate push. Mr. Charisma won the United States Cruiserweight and Hardcore titles in short order, becoming the first and, as it turned out, only person in the company's history to hold 3 titles at the same time. Storm was featured prominently for the remainder of his WCW tenure, which, as we know, was not long before he made the jump to WWE. Things again started well as he won the Intercontinental title, but lost it to Edge shortly after. Storm was a member of the Un-Americans and mainly used in tag teams before WWE clearly lost interest, had Steve Austin publicly chastise him for being a boring bastard, and gave him a dancing babyface gimmick that he was clearly uncomfortable with. His WWE career petered out as he became a Heat regular before quietly retiring and becoming a trainer for OVW. Number 5, Kanyon. Who better than Kanyon? Well, lots of people if you ask WWE decision makers who had no idea what to do with the hard-working innovator of offense. Kanyon had been a player in WCW, working his way up from lowly enhancement talent to become a fixture first as Mortis and then in a group with DDP and Bam Bam Bigelow. He was taken in by WWE during the sale of WCW, and though he won the WCW United States and WWE Tag Team titles, he was not treated as a serious threat, and after being pasted by the Brothers of Destruction, he began his slide down the card. A serious ACL tear put him on the sidelines for a good while, and when he was fit and healthy to return, he wasn't called upon much, wrestling primarily on Velocity and house shows. His most memorable post-injury contribution was in a segment where he appeared from a crate dressed as Boy George and sang "Do You Really Want to Hurt Me" to the American Badass, a segment that was about as subtle as a sewage truck crashing through a zoo wall. He was released in 2004 after years of battling injuries and creative team indifference. Number 4, Lex Luger. A main event mainstay in WCW, Lex Luger had just about all the tools to be one of the most successful wrestlers in the business, even if he didn't really care for the business all that much himself. Decorated with United States Tag Team and World Heavyweight titles, Luger possessed one of the best bodies in the business and could be a hell of a worker when he could be bothered. Those washboard abs and powerful pecs caught the bulging eyes of one Vince McMahon, obviously, who signed Luger not to his wrestling league, but rather the bound-to-fail World Bodybuilding Federation. And fail it did, with Luger never so much as tensing his biceps for the league before they went out of business. Luckily, he had wrestling to fall back on and was brought into WWE as the narcissist, a pretty perfect gimmick for the self-centered Luger. Not so good was the all-American character that saw him travel the country in his Lex Express tour bus. He may have racked up the miles on the road and shaken a lot of hands, but fans didn't care, and the run was a flop. Try as they might, Luger just didn't connect as everyone had hoped, and when his contract expired, he went right back to WCW and that sweet guaranteed money courtesy of ATM Eric. Number 3, Diamond Dallas Page. It's a good thing that Diamond Dallas Page is so bloody positive, because a more pessimistic soul would probably drive himself crazy wondering how he went from a massively over World Heavyweight Champion to being pinned by The Undertaker's wife. No, not that one, on Monday Night Raw. Page's improbable rise up the ranks of WCW WCW is an inspiring story. Getting into wrestling much later than most, DDP had to work extremely hard to attain the success he achieved. His hard work and abundant charisma helped him land major matches against the likes of Goldberg, Hulk Hogan, and even basketball star Dennis Rodman, lucky so-and-so. When he joined WWE after WCW's collapse, his hopes were probably high. Debuting as the stalker of the dead man's best gal, things got off to a rocky start and never really recovered, as he was battered all over the place and quickly headed down the pecking order. Do you sense a recurring theme here? A brief run with the European title and an entertaining feud with Christian was small mercies before injuries forced him to retire from the ring. His last WWE match, not including his appearance in the 2016 armbar, a 3-minute loss to Hardcore Holly on SmackDown. Eesh. Number 2, Buff Bagwell. He's buff, but when it comes to succeeding in WWE, he definitely did not have the stuff. Buff Bagwell was one of the more notable characters from the latter days of WCW, the vanilla Marcus Bagwell trading in his bland babyface card to become an obnoxious hat-wearing, muscle-flexing heel. The character was a winner, and Buff, who was one of the biggest stars that made the jump in 2001, was set to be a featured player in WWE's WCW revival. But his own worst enemy, Buff quickly went about alienating himself from the rest of the locker room in spectacular fashion. Among his indiscretions was showing up late for WWE-mandated practice sessions for former WCW talent, starting a fight with Shane Helms, and allegedly having his mother and former WCW Tag Team Champion Judy call up the office to complain on her son's behalf. Deeply unpopular with his co-workers, Bagwell was dismissed during a Raw taping on July 9th, 2001, 1 week after he and Booker T had one of the worst main events in company history and effectively killed WCW off as a viable brand. To this day, Bagwell, whose post-WWE career included time as a gigolo, does not understand why he was fired. Perhaps he could get his mum to call up Vince and ask. Number 1, Vader. It's time! It's time! It's time to talk about what went wrong for Vader in WWE. One of the greatest, most athletically gifted super heavyweights of all time, Big Van Vader was a huge success in WCW and had a number of classics with Sting, Ric Flair, Cactus Jack, and others, eventually racking up 3 World Heavyweight title reigns. After a backstage fight with Paul Orndorff, Vader left WCW and signed with WWE. Things got off to an encouraging start when the man they call Vader was booked to look strong on his debut in the '96 Royal Rumble, and then flattened the legendary Gorilla Monsoon in a strong angle. Some decent scraps with The Undertaker and HBK followed, but Vader's days as a viable challenger to the WWE title were quite clearly behind him, and a sad descent down the card followed. By the end of his run, the Mastodon was involved in bizarre feuds with Goldust and Kane, and had become little more than a jobber to upcoming talent like Bradshaw, Mark Henry, and Edge. He negotiated his release and then went back to Japan, where he enjoyed a prosperous second career. Whether it was backstage politics, management not knowing what to do with a talent like him, or something else, Vader's WWE run has to be considered a massive disappointment considering its potential.